I'm continuing to go through the Edexcel GCSE Maths Higher Tier Paper 1 from May 2020, and this is question 11, and it's a question about indices. So we can see this question's got several parts. The first one, we've got the fourth root, so that 4 there on the square root sign means that we've got the fourth root of 81 times 10 to the power 8. You can actually write that as an indices, and so the fourth root of something could be written as x to the quarter. So the bottom number there represents which root I've got. So what I can do is I can put a bracket around the 81 times 10 to the 8. I can actually put a power of a quarter. So that's equivalent to the line I've got above there. And then I can actually bring the quarter and get it to operate on each part of this separately. So I can say that becomes 81 to the quarter, and that's going to be times by 10 to the 8, and that's also to the quarter. So I can split it up at the times there into two things. So actually what I'm looking for is the fourth root of 81, which means it's the number that if I multiply by itself 4 times, I'll get 81. And I can see that 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, so 3 times 3 is 9, times another 3 is 27, times another 3 is 81, so that all equals 81. So that means that the fourth root of 81 is actually 3. So that means the fourth root of 81, 81 to the power 1 quarter, so that becomes 3. And then if we work out what the 10 to the 8 to the power quarter is, what we can do is we can use a rule whereby if we have x to a power in a bracket to another power outside the bracket, then we can actually multiply the a and the b together. So this is one of the rules we can use for indices. So that's the rule we use, and we're multiplying them powers together. So if we've got 10 to the 8 power 8 on the inside the bracket, quarter outside the bracket, then we can actually say that becomes 8 times 1 quarter as the power. So that will be 3 times 8 times a quarter is actually 8 divided by 4, which is 2. So it becomes 3 times 10 to the 2. And if I work out what 10 to the 2 is, 10 to the 2 is 100. So I've got 3 times 100, and that is just 300. If I look at the next one, I've got 64 to the power minus 1/2. So first of all, if I have something to the power of a minus, so let's say x to the minus 1, the effect of the minus is to put something into the denominator. So whatever I'm taking the power, I'm taking the reciprocal of it. So that becomes 1 over x. So actually, if I'm doing 64 to the power minus 1/2, I can cover up the minus there and put everything else into the denominator. So that becomes 64 to the half in the denominator there. And then I have to understand, what does the power half mean? Well, the bottom of a fraction is actually the root which I'm taking the 64 to. So it becomes 1 over the root of 64. And then I can just say, well, what is the square root of 64? And because 8 times 8 gives me 64, then it's actually 1 over 8. So that's my answer to this one. The final part is probably the most difficult. So I've got to write 3 to the power n over 9 to the power n minus 1 as a power of 3. So in other words, really what I've got to do is I've got to write it as 3 to some power. I don't know what that is, so I've written it as x there. So what I can do is I've got 3 to the power n, and I'm going to take the 9 and I'm going to say, well, 9 is actually 3 squared. So I'm turning the 9 into a 3, and then that's still to the power n minus 1. If we look at the rule that we had before, there was a rule where I say if I have x to a power inside a bracket and then with a power outside the bracket, what I can do is I can multiply them powers together and I get x to the power AB. Now I can do that here. I can times the 2 inside the bracket by n minus 1. So that works out as being 3 to the n over 3 to the, and if I times the 2 by the n minus 1, that actually gives me 2n minus 2. So we're getting closer to the answer. Now the next rule I'm going to use is that if I have something to a power, so I'm going to say x to the power a, and then that same thing to another power in the denominator, what I'm doing is I'm dividing x to the a by x to the b, and what I can do is I can subtract the powers, so that would become x to the a minus b. So that's the rule that I'm going to use. And so because I've got the same number here, the 3 and the 3, I can just make it a 3 with the power on the top one minus the power on the bottom one. So minus the 2n minus 2. And that will become, I have to be very careful with the minus signs there, that will become 3 to the n minus 2n, and then that minus and the minus on the 2 inside the brackets actually becomes a positive, so that becomes a plus 2. And just simplifying a bit further, n minus 2n is minus n, so that becomes 3 to the minus n plus 2. And that's fine as a final answer, but just because it looks a bit nicer, I might say that's 3 to the 2 minus n. I hope that's been helpful, and if it has, please consider subscribing to our channel and giving our video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.